Thanks to you at home for joining us this hour. This is May Day 1960. May 1st, 1960. It's a May Day parade in Moscow. And the thing that is remarkable about this parade in 1960 in Moscow is that the theme of the parade that year was all about peace. That year, the Soviets decided not to parade around their artillery and rockets and military equipment and stuff like usual. And instead, the theme that year was all about children and doves and peace. Which is kind of a remarkable thing, if you think about it, because 1960 was right in the middle of the Cold War, right? This is the year before they built the Berlin Wall. It's just 2 years before the Cuban Missile Crisis. You would think that the Soviets in 1960, they'd be wanting to display all of their biggest missiles, right? All of their finest weaponry as a show of force against the dreaded United States. It was an incredibly tense time for U.S.-Soviet relations. But there was this moment back in 1960 when the president of the United States at the time, Dwight Eisenhower, and the leader of the Soviet Union at the time, Nikita Khrushchev, they did in 1960, they did for a while seem like they were trying to thaw relations between our two countries. And to that end, those two leaders had planned to meet in Paris for a one-on-one superpower summit in 1960, a meeting to talk face-to-face, man-to-man about relations between our two countries, these two Cold War enemies. That meeting was supposed to take place about 2 weeks after that May Day parade. It's supposed to take place in mid-May 1960. And that summit meeting in Paris never happened. And the reason it never happened is because on the same day as this peace-themed May Day parade in Moscow, on May 1st, 1960, an American U-2 spy plane on a reconnaissance mission for the CIA was shot down over the Soviet Union. That American plane went down in Russia, and the pilot was a 30-year-old American named Gary Powers. He was captured alive by the Soviet Union, captured alive.
In Moscow, Nikita Khrushchev is shown as he told the Soviet Presidium that pilot Gary Powers of the downed American reconnaissance plane was alive, and that Russia had seized spy photographs made 1,400 miles inside Soviet borders. The plane was brought down on May Day, less than 2 weeks before the summit talks, and Mr. K was quick to play on the incident for propaganda advantage. Out in the open came the story of the most sensational intelligence operations yet revealed. America officially admits extensive flights over and around Russia by unarmed planes during the last 5 years. State Department spokesman Lincoln White gives the reasons for the flights.
That given the state of the world today, intelligence collection activities are practiced by all countries. And post-war history certainly reveals that the Soviet Union has not been lagging behind in this field.
The Soviet Union has not been lagging behind in this field. That's what the United States said officially, right? But there was no denying that this was a huge deal for the world to find out, not just that the CIA was spying on the Soviet Union using secret spy aircraft, but for the world to find out about it in this incredibly shocking way, with a shooting down of this supposedly very secret American spy plane, with the capture of the American pilot alive. 2 weeks later, the plans for that Soviet-American summit in Paris, those plans collapsed completely, and we all know what happened between the Soviet Union and the United States over the next few years. The Soviet Union proudly displayed the captured American U-2 spy plane for the world to see. Khrushchev himself visited the remnants of the plane, was sure to be photographed with the crashed plane parts. They played this up to maximum effect. And part of what made this story so sensational was that U-2 spy plane was supposed to be virtually undetectable by radar. It was supposed to fly at such a high altitude, at roughly 70,000 feet, that they thought radar wouldn't be able to pick it up and nobody would know it was there. But that U-2 spy plane was shot down in the Soviet Union. And then Moscow decided to put that American pilot, Gary Powers, on trial. Gary Powers, in his trial, was convicted in that Soviet court. He got a 10-year sentence. They sentenced him to 3 years in prison and then 7 additional years at hard labor. Gary Powers did not end up serving all that time. Ultimately, it was President Kennedy who got him released and a prisoner exchanged in 1962. But that incident was hugely embarrassing for the United States and hugely upsetting to our very tenuous relations with the Soviet Union. I mean, that was never supposed to have happened given the type of aircraft involved. And for that American pilot to have ended up a Soviet prisoner, it was just almost unthinkable. That was 1960. In 1995, An U.S. Air Force pilot named Scott O'Grady. He was flying a much smaller plane. He was flying an F-16 fighter jet over Bosnia. The United States was part of an international coalition that had decided to intervene against the Serbs in the war that was being fought in Bosnia. In June 1995, pilot Scott O'Grady's F-16, it was shot down in hostile territory in Bosnia. Mr. O'Grady disappeared for 6 days until U.S. Marines went in on the ground in a rescue mission.
2:08 local time this morning, the mission to rescue begins. NATO aircraft over Bosnia get a flash Morse code from O'Grady deep in hostile Serb territory 20 miles south of Bihać. 12 minutes later, O'Grady speaks into his high-tech handheld radio. His voice instantly is recognized by a buddy from his squadron in an F-16 overhead, the radio pinpointing his position, positive identification. Marines rescue specialists on the Kearsarge prepare for action. They know they must fly over areas bristling with Serb anti-aircraft weapons. Daylight makes them easy targets. Still, at 5:50, 2 Marine Cobra gunships get the order to go and are launched from the Kearsarge. Next, 2 CH-53 assault choppers loaded with 41 of the highly trained Marines. They do have Harrier jump jets and F-16s and A-10s as backup. Electronic warfare planes jam Serb radar. And they move in fast, O'Grady popping a yellow smoke grenade, choppers landing, Marines forming a security line, 2 minutes on the ground.
The Marines secured the area, and Captain O'Grady came running out of the tree line, jumped on the second 53, and they lifted